Oh, it's on. All right, gang. I know we're really short on time, so I'm going to very quickly introduce, um, as you guys, all of you know, my name is Nikki Maurer Gray. I'm the executive director of the Community Health Council, and about a year ago, a little over, we came to the city and to the county to ask for their funding support for a comprehensive market analysis of the county. And that study has been completed. And of course, the city shared a portion of the investment in this study. So we're really excited to have Patrick Bowen, who is the owner of the vendor of the research agency that we chose to do the study, here with us today. And he's going to do an overview of the city's focused portion of the study. We have been on quite a roadshow over the last 2 days, presenting to the commissioners, to the school board, or the superintendents, I'm sorry, and also we had a general population county presentation earlier this afternoon. So without any more further ado, other than a thank you to the city for helping to fund the study, Patrick.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. Again, Patrick Bowen, president of Bowen National Research. We actually did two studies. So one was a county-wide needs assessment, and then we focused in on the city itself. So today you're going to see the highlights of the city. You may see some references to the county as well to show you how you compare overall, but this is the city study. I had a reset here. It up. Well, you know what? The light keeps going out. I turn it on. It'll stay on for like 1 second. The batteries. There we go. We're good. Okay, so a lot went into this study, a lot of demographic information, economics, commuting patterns, things like that. We looked at your housing supply, that was your rentals, your for sale housing stock, your senior care housing. And then we come up with housing gap estimates, essentially saying what is your shortage of housing, both on rental and for sale at different affordability levels. And then we provide some broad recommendations for you all to consider. So this particular part of the study is focusing in on the city of Lebanon itself. We do, again, have a county-wide housing study that was broken into submarkets, which were the school districts of the county. So if there was for some reason you all wanted to see what was happening county-wide or within the districts, you can see that. But we'll focus here on the city for the most part. So quickly, I just want to show you population trends for the area. You were growing. Dark blue is the city. Royal blue is the county. Light blue is the state of Pennsylvania. So different points in time in that graph. You were growing quickly between 2010 and 2020. But slowed down over the last couple years, which many Pennsylvania markets did. Once COVID hit, a lot of things kind of changed in our world. And you're still projected to grow, though, in terms of population. I'm going to focus here on the households here in a second, because that's really the world that matters mostly for housing needs. But you're projected to grow some. You can see in the table at the bottom right, if nothing else changes, all normal trends, you're going to add about 200 people citywide. But relative to the county, you can see there's substantially more growth. One of the things we're asked to evaluate to some degree was information on the Hispanic demographics of the area. And the Hispanic population in the city itself is about 11,700 people relative to your 26,000 people that you have in the city. So about 44% of your population is Hispanic. I cited several key demographic characteristics of the population. Some of the more notable things, obviously, is those people that live in or do not have a high school diploma, almost double the rate of the non-Hispanic population. $31,000 median household income relative to everybody else is 42,000. And how many live in poverty? 34% relative to 17% to the non-Hispanic, so almost double the rate. So they certainly have some challenges within the Hispanic community. Household trends, which to me are actually more critical in a housing needs assessment because households drive housing needs. Ton of information we have in the study. I just want to highlight a couple real quick. Again, like the population trends, you were growing in between 2010 and 2020. Your numbers are in the royal blue in the graph. Slowed down in 2020 to 2022. And you're still expected to have some growth. You see in the table from 2022 to 2027, you're expected to add about 39 households. So not a lot of growth if nothing changes. The county-wide, it estimates about 580 households. I think one of the things that's holding both the city and the county back is you don't have a lot of housing available. So even though there's people that may want to move here, they really don't have very many choices, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. This is households by age groups, 3 different points in time: 2010, 2022, 2027, city versus county. County's in the shade in the middle there. Pennsylvania, for another base of reference, is at the bottom. You have most of your growth shown in green between 2022 and 2027 is on the households that are age 65 and older. That's very similar to what's happening countywide. One difference here in the city that's not happening countywide is that 35 to 44 age group, you're not really losing many, but you're losing some. You're not gaining like it is expected to occur in the county or state of Pennsylvania. So if I were to flag at least a handful of things, this would be one of the things I would flag here. You're having a tough time holding on to those older millennials in the city. This is renter households by income. Again, city numbers are on the top relative to the county or the state of Pennsylvania. I have different income levels at different points in time. Most of your renters in the area, almost half of them, make less than $30,000 a year. Where's all your growth expected among renter households? Again, if things trend the way they would normally would, it's going to be those that make over $50,000 or more a year, renter households. Now, one of the things I caution everybody on when they see this information is you are expected to experience some decline in those lower income households shown in the red at the bottom of your city totals. That does not mean you do not need more affordable housing. You do. I'll show you what the situation is for your low income households. There's significant pent up demand for affordable housing. So again, do not conclude that we're losing low income people. We must not need affordable housing, rental housing you do, but you definitely need higher price housing as well as your, again, the projected growth among the higher income households indicate some opportunities there for higher end market rate rentals. We did the same exercise for homeowners, multiple points in time, city versus county versus the state. You have a large number of lower income homeowners, but you also have more than half of your homeowners, I circled in that red on the right-hand side, more than just over half of your owner households make over $60,000 a year. Where are you expected to grow over that 5-year projection period? It's those that make over $60,000 a year. So just like the rental side, you have growth among higher income households. You're going to need additional housing for them. But even though you don't have growth among lower income households, you still have a lot of renters that would be first-time home buyers if housing was made available to them. Migration patterns, this is countywide. I don't have it for the city, but it's still relevant. Anything in green, circled in green, are counties that are adjacent to Lebanon County. And you can see this gross migration in that one column. That means people that are moving in and out. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're gaining, just overall. Lancaster County, compared to Lebanon, you had about 2,500 people moving annually between the two counties. So that's your biggest influence in your area. But on the far right is your net migration, meaning are we gaining people from these counties or are we losing them? You're gaining them from Lancaster County, but the next 4, you're actually losing folks. They're moving to those other areas, at least more so than they are coming here. That's not unusual to have a lot of migration between your county and the adjacent counties. That's where most people make their moves. But nonetheless, 4 out of 5 counties nearby, you're losing folks to them. This is migration again on the county level. The only thing I wanted to illustrate here was those last set of columns there that I encircled in red. The first set is people moving from a different county, but here in Pennsylvania, that come into Lebanon County. Out of those people that move from a different state that are coming here to the county. And you've got a lot of people that are coming here, again, not city, countywide, that are lower income households or lower income persons. They're taking a lot of the lower wage jobs. You do have others, though. If you go down the table, you could see a lot of higher income folks that are moving into the area and taking some of these moderate to higher income jobs. So a little bit of everything. But again, a lot of people, almost half, are taking jobs that are paying less than $25,000 a year, and that obviously affects your housing needs. This is commuter trends. So this is just for the city. You have about 8,300 people coming into the city every day for work. You have about 1,800 people that live and work in the city, and then you've got another 10,000 that are going outside the city to work and then come back home. The 8,200 is really relevant because you get about 80% of your workers, 81.6 specifically, the people that work here are not from here. And so there's obviously an opportunity to have housing options available to them. When we do research around the country, we didn't get the data here for your community, but when we do research to find out from people that are commuting into a community but don't stay there to live, we ask them, would you want to live in this community? 40% typically tell us, yes, if the housing was available and affordable to me, I would live in that community. And so you've got a lot of people that probably would consider that here in the city of Lebanon. Where are they coming from? We listed the cities. Obviously, 20% of your workers are actually from this area. The rest come from places like Pleasant Hill, Cornwall, Lebanon South, and places like even Philadelphia. Um, so again, most of the people that work here are coming from areas nearby. This is the rental housing supply. So we actually contacted apartments in the area. This is city data only. We do have county information as well. But this is city data, 21 properties, 1,500 units. You have 7 vacant. And we did break it out by different housing types, market rate, tax credit. Tax credit generally serves households that make about $68,000, up to $68,000 a year for a family of 4. Government subsidized towards the bottom of the table. Family of 4, that's about $42,000 a year that they would serve up to. So more affordable housing as you go down the list. Nonetheless, all those affordable options are full. The only vacancies you have are market rate. You have a 99.5% occupancy rate. Normally, what you want is like 94 to 96%. It's a healthy market. You want vacancies. You want people to be able to move around. You want people to move to the area. As their lives change, you want vacancies. For owners of properties, great news, high occupancy rate. They're doing fine. They're doing well financially on collecting on rents. But for your citizens, this is a problem. How about wait lists? We break out the wait list for the properties we survey by those different program types. And you have wait lists across the board. But notice in the government subsidized, you have about 1,800 people waiting to get into one of those tax credit projects, or a wait of 30 up to 36 months. That's 3 years to get into one of those units. Government subsidized, 7,100 people waiting to get into a government subsidized unit, up to 60 months of a wait, 5 years to get into one of those rentals. Remember, I said earlier, you have the household projections that show the lower income households are expected to decline. You have thousands of people waiting to get in those units. So significant pent-up demand. We also acknowledge the Housing Choice Voucher Program in the area, and I won't go through that now just out of respect of your time, but the point is there's a significant pent-up demand to get those Housing Choice Vouchers from the Housing Authority. Almost 1,200 households waiting to get a voucher to help subsidize their rents. So a long wait to get a voucher. So long wait to get a voucher, long wait to get into government subsidized, long wait to get into tax credit housing. A lot of information on here. We broke out the rental supply, market rate on top, tax credit in the middle, government subsidized on the bottom. Again, point being, everything's full. It doesn't matter what kind of affordability we are talking about or the bedroom types. I pointed out the rents up there of the most common market rates that you have, median rents of $940 for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, or $1,100 for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. Again, most common type. If you're even lucky to get one of those, which is very few are available, well, more than 60% of your renters can't even afford that. So you don't have much available for them to get into, and you don't have much that's available or affordable to many of your residents. I threw this in here real quick just to let you know that the study is armed with so much data, not necessarily would be useful to you all or anybody, other stakeholder typically, but I also armed this because I knew developers will be looking at this study to understand the market. And so we put all this kind of information in there that's available to them. It'll be metrics that they're looking for to understand if I'm going to build apartments in the city or the county, what kind of information do I have on the local housing market? So we armed the study with that. If you cannot rent an apartment, what else can you rent? You can rent a non-conventional rental. So that means anything that's not an apartment. So it could be a house, a duplex, mobile home, a unit over a storefront, anything that's not an apartment, that's a non-conventional rental. That makes up almost 3/4 of your housing stock, 4,200 units. Most of those have rents between $750 and $1,500, almost 2/3 of them. So can be somewhat high rents. There are some that are well over $1,000, 28% of them. So there's obviously an opportunity for some rent premium. So if a developer was looking at what can I possibly get in this market, there is an opportunity to get higher rents. But for your residents, they are having a tough time meeting their housing costs, both on the rental side and the for sale, which I'll show you in a minute. My staff did a really good job of trying to find out what's available. In that blue bar at the bottom, we found 33 citywide that are available to rent. If I compare that to the entire 4,200, roughly, of these non-conventional rentals, that comes out to an occupancy rate of 99.2. So like the rentals, you have an extremely high occupancy rate. Okay, well, let me go find something else. Let me find a non-conventional 99.2. These are not good metrics in terms of what is available to your residents. How about your for sale market? This is homes sold between 2020 and the end of 2022. This is citywide data. Blue bars show the number of homes sold each year. The green line is showing you the median home price. Your median home price since between 2020 and 2022 has gone up $39,000, 35%. So home prices continue to escalate, even though the blue bars show you starting to slow down in terms of what's being sold. $150,000 probably seems affordable to some folks. Again, this is homes sold. Now let me show you what's available. So this is your inventory of what is available. This would have been as of March of this year. You have 53 houses. If you look at the top right of that table, most of those 53, 36 of them are priced over $300,000. So you're talking almost 70% of your housing stock that's available for potential home buyers are priced at that level, and very few homes priced, was it 16, 17, under $300,000. Particularly look at the $200,000 to $300,000 range, two houses. So if you have somebody that wants to come here to take a certain position with a company, boy, it's going to be a tough time. Unless they can afford that $300,000 home, it's going to be tough for them. Even for homes that are priced under $200,000. Most of those homes are 50, 60, 70 years old. So yeah, it might be affordable to moderate to lower income households, but then they've got to put money towards renovations and things like that. So that's a major financial challenge for them. Those 53 homes that we found that are available, if I compare that to all the owner-occupied housing stock that you have in the city, that comes back at an availability rate of 1.1% on the left-hand side there in the blue box. Where do you want? You want to be about 2 or 3%. So you're about half at minimum where you want to be. Another way to look at that is what realtors do, where they'll take that inventory of 53 homes and say, look, if we sell our homes at the normal rate that we do every month, and we don't add a single housing unit, how fast will that market be gone? How fast will those 53 homes be sold? I have it 2.1 months. So this inventory will be gone if you don't add anything, or if nobody puts a home on the market, which they will. But nonetheless, you have 2.1 months of inventory. What is healthy? 4 to 6 months. So again, another measure to say, we just don't have much available. We looked at your senior care facilities, whether it's assisted living or nursing care. We only had 2 that we identified or at least surveyed in the city. You can see there's plenty of them in the rest of the county. Occupancy rates, I circled in the first set of red numbers there. Compared to national averages, you're really similar. But one of the things to keep in mind is most of your growth, as I showed earlier on, that households by age group, most of your projected household growth is among those that are 75 and older. So as this market is in line right now with national trends, as your household and population base for older adults increase, you're going to have greater demand for senior housing. Whether they find it here in the city or they find it elsewhere in their county, there's going to be a significant need for such housing. Some other data I wanted to throw up. I won't go through this in great detail, but in the end, a couple things we looked at for quality of housing. In the middle of that table, we have overcrowded housing. So this is like HUD's definition of what is considered overcrowded. We also looked at units, believe it or not, you do have some, not many, but do not lack or do not have complete plumbing or kitchen facilities. We took those all together. You have about 403 households that in the city are living in what's classified as substandard housing. Again, it's not our definition, that's the federal government's definition. So you do have a notable number of people that are living in housing conditions they probably shouldn't be in. So again, housing quality is an issue that certainly should be discussed as the city moves forward. How about affordability? At the very bottom, underneath the table, I define what is housing cost burden. That's people that pay over 30% of their income towards housing. And then the very bottom, in that orange color, those are severe cost housing burden. Those are people that pay over half. So believe it or not, there are people that pay over half their income towards their housing costs, leaving them very little money left to pay for other expenses, healthcare, food, clothing, whatever it might be, other essentials. If you see on the table, I marked in red the share of cost burden households. Your shares are very similar to the county, very similar to state averages. When we go to the severe cost burden, again, all very similar, both renter and owner households, your shares. But in the end, you've got about 4,000 households that are living in housing cost burden situations. Part of that is because you don't have anything available. So what happens is I can't find another rental that I can afford. I can't find a house that I can afford. So I'm going to live in something that is going to be over my budget and I'm paying excessive amounts towards, and I become housing cost burden. So another challenge is affordability. Might not be able to see the numbers, and that's okay in this particular slide. So what I have here are these are the 25 most common occupations in the area. Cashiers, retail people, nurses, elementary school teachers, on and on. Top 25, not necessarily in order of the biggest to the smallest, but these are your biggest occupations or largest occupations within the area. At the very top, above the table, I put fair market rent, 989, which is basically the government's number for saying that's what a two-bedroom generally in this area should cost. I also put the median list price of 250. So what we did was, as you go across the table, again, numbers are hard to see, but if you took the cashiers, which are at the very top, we have their income, the lower quartile, about 18,000, meaning the bottom 25. These would be like entry-level people taking a cashier's job. Or median, the midpoint, $22,000 is the wage for them. If you go across, we put on the first two sets of housing supply, what can they afford in rent? $459 at the lower quartile level, or $567 at the median level. That's what they can afford in rent. Same thing for the home prices. As you go further to the right, they can afford a home at $61,000 if they wanted to buy it, $75,000 if they're at the median level. Anything in red is telling you that what they can afford is not what's in this market. So you can see the majority, particularly on the for sale side, but you can even look at the rental side, most of your workers cannot afford to rent and buy. Now, the one caveat of all this data is this is one wage earner. This is one person's wage. But what this is telling you is that you better have a second job, you better have another wage earner in the house, and even then many of these workers would have a tough time affording rentals and certainly have a tough time purchasing a home. We looked at development costs in the area and as well as your zoning. There's nothing overburdening within your zoning that we felt that is something that needs to be changed. All zoning can be improved, but there's nothing we found like, okay, this is a burden, this is a problem for the city. So I don't think there's anything zoning-wise that's a detriment to the city. We looked at development costs for the area. Again, some of the county-wide at least, the taxes are lower. Some of your other fees are lower. So development costs is another one that we felt wasn't a deterrent for the area. I would say county-wide, when we compare you to other counties in the region, some of your costs are actually lower. So you have some level of competitive advantage to some of your surrounding counties in terms of what it would cost a developer to build here. We did surveys. How am I on time? I got 5 minutes? All right. Then I'm going to go through this really fast. We surveyed stakeholders, so these would be community leaders. You all may have participated in these surveys. In the end, affordability was probably the bigger issue, along with what's available in this market. About 4 bullet points down, we hit barriers to, and again, this is countywide information, so it's not singled out for the city, but barriers to the development and I guess even the reduction of some of the barriers is development costs are what a lot of folks are thinking are the biggest deterrent for residential development. And so people mention public-private sector collaboration, home repair assistance, educating the public on housing, residential code enforcement, establishing a housing trust fund. So there's a lot of things folks felt might want to be considered here in the city or the county to resolve some of the housing issues. We surveyed your employers, and they acknowledged in the very first bullet point that this is basically employee housing issues, not resident. Employee housing issues. Employers are telling us unaffordable rentals, lack of available housing, unaffordable for sale housing. So all the things we've kind of talked about quickly here today. We'll skip down to the third bullet point, which to me is maybe one of the bigger findings of the study is we asked employers, is housing impacting you? And so you can see 40% of them said, look, housing is creating a problem with my ability as an employer to attract employees. 22% are telling us they're having difficulty retaining employees. So clearly your employers are feeling the squeeze in terms of what housing markets are doing or the housing market is doing to them. The very next bullet point we have there is likelihood of hiring more workers if housing issues were resolved. So if you resolve your local housing issues, 31%, so almost a third, are telling us that yes, they would more likely to hire more people if housing issues could be resolved. We asked people, either residents or commuters coming into the area, about housing issues. I listed on the left-hand side some of the key findings. In the end, about 80% of the people are saying there's a problem here in terms of finding adequate housing. It has a lot of various housing issues, including on the third bullet point, housing cost burden, which I had talked about, moving in with family or friends, lack of security deposit or down payments, things like that. We asked them what type housing is needed in terms of affordability and even product type. So you can see some of their comments in terms of what they came back with in terms of most pressing product types or product affordability levels. So these are the rental housing gaps, again, just for the city. Top half is rental, bottom half is for sale. We broke it out by different affordability levels. So the lower affordability levels on the left-hand side going up to the higher price. So this covered the whole spectrum of affordability. There's a lot of things that we looked into to derive these numbers. In the end, we came back with a citywide rental housing need of about 1,400 units and a for sale housing gap of about 500 units. The bottom of each one of those tables, you see in the bold print, the number of units needed for each one of these affordability levels. And you can see that most of the need for rentals is really in those first two columns. Actually, you can take all three of those, the first three. It's basically rentals under $2,500, but even more so under $1,700. The greatest need for those that are priced under $1,065. So gaps across the board, but more affordable is where we're coming back with in terms of the greatest gaps. It flips when you get to the bottom and you're looking at for sale housing. The greatest need is for higher priced home. And again, as we showed you in the beginning, all that growth among higher income households, you do need higher end products. So this market can support a lot of different things. The one thing I tell people is these are not, finite numbers. Things change, circumstances change. How I would be using this if I was in your positions is I would use this to help start setting priorities. That's all this really is needed for. So if you're trying to focus on what is our greatest needs, where are our greatest opportunities, you can see where the rentals are, you can see where the for sale side is, and trying to start to assess what do we do as a community, what should our priorities be. And this is the last slide I have. So we have recommendations in the study, somewhat broad because obviously we don't know all the things you might want to do. But we do list of several things in the study that talks about how do you help incentivize development. And so we list a bunch of stuff. I put a very few in here, but the study is armed with a bunch of things, whether it's tax abatements, whether it's waiving or reducing building fees, density bonuses. There's a ton of stuff that we can point you to other communities, say here's what they've done and things that have worked for them. You also have some substandard housing in the area, so there's obviously things you can do to assist on preserving your housing stock. We've seen a lot of communities do grants or low interest loans to help lower income households to preserve your housing stock or weatherization of your existing housing stock. Third one, partnerships between public and private sectors. I can give you a bunch of examples around the country. I'm from right outside of the Columbus, Ohio area, and Children's Hospital there has done some great things with turning around their neighborhood and getting their employees into more affordable housing. But there's examples all over the nation that I could give you of where government and the private sector have worked together. I will add one of the dynamics that has changed since COVID hit was employers being part of the solution, because I think employers, as you saw there here locally, telling you that about 30% or a third saying that they're being impacted by housing. And so we're starting to see a trend around the country where employers are starting to say, we also want to be part of the discussion and possibly part of the solution. The fourth bullet point down is identifying lead agency or establishing a housing committee or task force, or retaining a housing professional to lead housing efforts. A lot of communities have good intentions. You have a study done, you have recommendations, but somebody has to take the lead in this. Again, whether somebody appoints a task force, whether the community comes together to create a housing coalition, or in some cases, some communities will hire somebody to come in and lead their housing efforts because housing is complicated and obviously you folks have a lot on your plate, the things that you're juggling beyond housing. So I've seen a lot of communities have almost like an advisory committee that would come periodically and say, hey, here's what we've learned. We've talked to the community. These are things we can do to support our housing efforts. The next to last bullet point is basically keeping the public informed on housing efforts and possibly developing some kind of online resource web tool or resource center where people can get all kind of information on local housing markets. That can include information for developers to inform them, but it also could be for residents to help them find housing or resolve housing issues. And then the last piece is marketing and outreach efforts to try to attract residential developers and obviously investors. On Tuesday, I'm traveling to Michigan to do what they're calling a Developers Day, where they've got developers lined up. They just informed me Monday that it's booked. They've got a room packed. I'm one of many speakers, so I'll talk about their housing needs, but they've got then other speakers that would maybe their county engineer or others that would talk about what is our capacity to take on more housing. When that is done in the morning, they're taking developers to a dozen sites or whatever around the county. So they have made an effort to market their community, to contact developers, to have something in place to launch their efforts. And so I can give you other examples ultimately if your community starts to move forward of things you want to try. Again, we don't list everything in the study because I don't know what you would want to do. I don't know where your priorities are. But nonetheless, we can help take this further if you need to. But you've got an essential initial roadmap to figure out what are our challenges, which you probably knew a lot of these already, affordability, availability. But I think when you see the numbers and start to understand, okay, the depth of the problem is significant, tie that back to your workers and what they can afford to rent or buy, tie that back to your employers and the struggles that they are going through and the opportunity for them to hire more workers if we could solve the housing issues here. So you can see there's great opportunities. It's just a matter of how you want to move forward. With that, I will, feel like I went fast, but so any questions or, yes, ma'am. Correct. City, the city, yep. And I'm sorry, real quick, and that's unusual too, by the way. That's about 80% of your workers aren't here. That is, compared to what I look at, it's maybe 60% on the high end. So you've got an extremely high end local workers that are not living in your community. I'm sorry. Correct. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, in their recommendations, we talk about uh, the county making efforts to help address housing, bringing the communities together. You had all the municipalities, but we also had in their recommendations that the municipalities, for those that have interest and desire, capacity. Correct. That's right. So, but they could facilitate some of those conversations to start getting communities to work together. Absolutely. Yep. We have. We don't like yours. We didn't break yours down into the municipalities. We have it your as small as the districts. So yes, we have studied communities that have multiple municipalities with their own issues at times, and yours will have the same. Each one is a little bit different, but yes. And let me add this too. I think sometimes I've had this comment made to me. It's like, man, this information is so depressing. It's so discouraging. But really, there's a lot of opportunities here. And if I was a developer looking at this community, there are so many things pointed out in this study, not just this presentation, to me that would resonate. And I knew that. And so I tried to arm this study with a lot of information so that I knew. We do over 500 site-specific studies for developers all over the nation. So I know all the things they're looking for, all the data sets. So you got it. This study has it. So you may all look at the study and go, wow, I don't care about this. Developers will, investors of real estate will. So this study is going to speak to a lot of other people. The key is you got to get word out. You have to market this. But it all goes back to the one thing I suggest is somebody has to spearhead this, right? Because you all may want to help solve issues. Citizens might want that too. But somebody has to kind of be the lead in this. And that's where I think this journey begins for you all. lot of different places. The demographic information would have been either from the Census Bureau, American Community Survey, or ESRI, which is a national demographer. Economics from Bureau of Labor Statistics. For sale stuff is from multiple listing service that realtors use. And then most of that rental data is us, where we contacted property managers and collected it. So a lot of different sources. That was just some of them, but those are the big ones for this study. And then all the community input that we got where we surveyed stakeholders, residents, employers. Anything else? No, in fact, you got that question. I did not get that question, I think. No, nothing surprised me. Okay. Nothing really surprised me. I think maybe the good news in all this is you're not alone, right? The nation is going through a serious housing crisis. I've never been busier. I'm booked into next year with stuff. So everybody's facing the same challenges. I mean, if before I did a single piece of research, I could have wrote on a piece of paper, City of Lebanon, Lebanon County, issues, affordability, availability, and to a lesser degree, possibly housing quality. Okay, so we do the research and what comes back. So you're not alone. And that's the good news too. There's a lot of communities that are in some cases years ahead of you addressing their housing issues that have come up with some really innovative things. One of the things I always point people to, if you're trying to think out of the box, I would point people to Asheville, North Carolina. It's phenomenal in terms of the things they came up with. That may not fit for you all, but maybe it will. So that's a place to start. But if there's other places that Patrick, other examples, please let me know or get a hold of Nikki and I can again point you to all kind of resources. Yeah, not yet. No, not that I'm aware of. Right. Well, like just like you, right? Federal government's got budgetary limitations, and so it's like they got to decide where do they prioritize. All right, folks. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah. Yep.